Welcome, everybody, to Testimonial Monday. My name is Gian-Carlo Torres, and I am your friend. Today, we have a special interview with my good friend, Dr. Jimmy Gutman. And the title is Glutathione and Cardiovascular Disease. So how does glutathione work with cardiovascular disease? And Dr. Gutman, the world-renowned expert on glutathione, will talk about this. If you don't know who Dr. Jimmy Gutman is, stay today, either if you're live or you're watching this through video, and you will see all of the rich info Dr. Gutman has. Also, Dr. Gutman is the author of the comprehensive guide on glutathione. And he sold many books, and really no one in the world knows more about glutathione than my good friend, Dr. Jimmy Gutman. Now, before we start this call, I have to make a statement from the FDA that the products that we will be talking about tonight have not been regulated by the FDA. But even though it's not intended to cure, treat, or diagnose any disease, what we'll talk about is, again, glutathione. You probably never even heard about glutathione, but glutathione is a molecule we all have in our body. Once we raise it naturally, great things can happen. So I'm going to have now Dr. Gutman with me in Spotlight, and we'll talk. So Dr. Gutman, can you hear me? Dr. Gutman, you are in mute. Oh, wait. Okay.
How does that sound now? Okay, good.
You sound great, Dr. Gutman. Dr. Gutman, thank you so much for saying yes. I'm up for this interview. Truly. Thank you.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Dr. Gutman, I know that you ran an emergency program at one of the top hospitals in Canada, McGill University. I imagine that you are in a perfect position to comment on the importance and prevalence of cardiovascular disease. So I'm quite sure this is something you've dealt with hundreds, if not thousands, in your career.
Well, for anybody who's worked in an emergency department, you know that heart disease really is the bread and butter of what we do. Is just such a common thing. We always have a corner of the emergency department set out specifically to take care of cardiac emergencies. And in most jurisdictions in Canada and United States, in order to be able to practice in an emergency department, you have to have taken courses on advanced cardiac life support. So this is something we're constantly on the lookout for. It usually, next to trauma, is the most exciting part of the day, if you want to use the term exciting. Nerve-wracking is another term that we can use, but we like to think that we're prepared enough to be able to take things adequately. So cardiovascular disease is just a huge component of an emergency department.
Yeah, I bet. Now, Dr. Gutman, when we say cardiovascular disease, I know many people, like myself, think of heart attacks. I know it represents far more than that. So can you give us an idea of the scope of this problem?
Well, one very easy way to highlight the scope, as you put it, the number one killer of Americans is cardiovascular disease. That's the case with Canadians, Mexicans, and worldwide. Now, you would think that worldwide, perhaps infectious disease would be the number one cause, and that people in other parts of the world that don't have access to endless supply of McDonald's hamburgers, the cardiac disease wouldn't be an issue, but it still is the number one killer worldwide. But when we talk about cardiovascular disease, we have to include not just heart attack, but things like stroke. Stroke is just a cardiovascular disease that affects the brain. When we look at things like diabetes, now what puts diabetics into the hospital or into the grave? It's not high sugar, and that's just the number. That's not just a biochemical measurement. What kills the majority of serious diabetic patients is cardiovascular disease. What makes a diabetic blind or have kidney failure is because their cardiovascular system has gone off. And when we talk about cardiovascular disease, we're talking about high blood pressure, and we're talking about deep vein thrombosis, and the list goes on and on. So it envelops a whole lot of different pathologies that fall under this one group, but there are some commonalities.
Thank you for explaining that. And I think it's good to understand this, how broad, right, is a cardiovascular disease. Now, Dr. Gutman, at the simplest level, can you explain the most common reason for the development of cardiovascular disease?
Well, of course, this will be a simplification, but it really does make it easier to understand. Cardiovascular means the heart and the vessels. And what's going on over there is, think of it as plumbing. You've got a pump and you've got a bunch of pipes. And when the lining of those pipes start to get clogged up, the pump is going to work harder. And the rooms that are supplied by the pipes get less stuff through the pipe because it's getting clogged. And if a pipe got clogged completely to your bathroom, you wouldn't have any toilet water, you wouldn't have anything to wash your face. If a pipe got clogged to your brain, it wouldn't be receiving blood, which carries oxygen, and it would end up being starved and damaged. So it really is just a matter of taking care of the pump and making sure that the pipes that the pump is serving don't get clogged up. So in the case of cardiovascular disease, again, it's very, very complicated, but just to really simplify it, the stuff that's clogging up our arteries is something called plaque. And a big component of plaque is a combination of fat, and it becomes especially dangerous when this fat gets oxidized. So now we get into the realm of antioxidants, and of course, you know where this is going.
Absolutely. And the best way really to understand, and I would say medicine and how our body works, are illustrations like those. So we appreciate that because now it's kind of ingrained in us on how this works. Now, it's the accumulation of plaque lining our blood vessels. We got that, and arteries at the root of the problem. So here's a $1 million question. How does glutathione fit in?
You see, two people can have the same cholesterol level. Now, when we talk about cholesterol, we're talking about one of the nastiest fats that causes cardiovascular disease. So it's a type of fat. Cholesterol is a type of fat, triglycerides, type of fat. And when these fats get in high levels, they have a tendency to accumulate. Now, you can have the same cholesterol level as I do, but you might be at a bigger risk because, let's say, you have diabetes. Diabetics have a higher level of oxidative stress. They need more antioxidants, and they're missing things like glutathione to serve that antioxidant function. Because when fats become oxidized, when you take cholesterol and you oxidize it, you expose it to free radicals, it changes biochemically, it changes its nature, and it becomes, so to speak, stickier. So it's more likely to gum up those vessels. So the answer to your question, which is the perfect lead-in, we have a circulating substance in our blood that slows down or prevents the oxidation of these fats. It slows down lipid peroxidation. It slows down the oxidation of cholesterol. And that substance is called glutathione peroxidase. So if your glutathione levels are low, your glutathione peroxidase levels are low, so you're much more likely to have this circulating fat turn into plaque, plug up your arteries, and lead to a heart attack or a stroke. So really, people with high glutathione levels have a better protection against cardiovascular disease.
Incredible. Now, I know a lot of people, Dr. Gutman, watching this right now must be asking, is it really that simple? And if so, why is it that I'm finding about this now? What would you answer?
Wow. Well, I wish it was that simple. There are other factors at play and other types of inflammation that come in, and genetics comes in. But the solution really needs to be multifaceted. And by raising your inherent natural antioxidants level by bumping up glutathione, it's a simple thing to do. And you absolutely need to do that. It's like going out in a Montreal winter, driving your car and not putting your seatbelt on. It's a simple thing to put your seatbelt on. It's going to protect you. It's going to limit the damage or maybe have no damage at all. So doctors, I guess I'm allowed making fun of doctors because I am a doctor. Don't really have a great handle on things like antioxidants. They're only now becoming better educated about nutrition. They do things because their cookbook tells them to do it. For example, doctors will always put diabetic patients on cholesterol lowering drugs at a much earlier phase of their regular patients. And you ask them why. And the answer most of the time is, well, that's what you're supposed to do with diabetics. You got to get them on these statins at an earlier number because they're more at risk. And you ask, why are they more at risk? And they can't answer the question. And in fact, the question is, diabetics have higher levels of oxidative stress, which makes their cholesterol and triglycerides levels more dangerous. And that's why you treat them with statins. But geez, why treat them with a potentially, I'm not going to call it a toxic drug, I would get into trouble. Why treat it with a drug that has potential adverse effects when you could treat it with a much more natural means? Now, of course, doctors are much better now about trying to convince their patients to get more exercise, to eat properly, to quit smoking. We do all that. It ain't working that good because you still have to have a patient that has the strength, ability, willingness, and desire to do something difficult like go on a diet and do exercise when they've never done that their whole life. So this small nutritional intervention to raise glutathione levels here can be the difference between being in the hospital, being in the grave, or being at home. So we need to pay attention to this.
Excellent. And what about measuring glutathione levels? Could that be a strategy?
It could be a strategy. The problem with measuring glutathione levels is it's technically very, very difficult to do, and it's expensive to do. It's expensive to do it well. You can go online now and find glutathione tests, for 30 or 40 bucks online. They're not particularly accurate, and some of them are all over the map. And when I start asking questions like, where are you measuring glutathione? Is it in the serum? Is it in the blood? Is it inside the cells? Are you looking for oxidized glutathione, reduced glutathione? Are you looking for the ratio between oxidized and reduced glutathione? So all of these questions start to overwhelm people, and they realize it ain't that simple, and it's not. So right now, to do a good glutathione measurement will cost a lot of money, and most laboratories don't do it. But when you look at the research done by many cardiologists who have set up a corner of the lab to do a proper glutathione test, they will tell you that measuring glutathione is an excellent forecast of what's going to happen to a patient. Patients that are at risk for myocardial infarction, heart attacks, are going to have a drop in glutathione levels. People with a drop in glutathione levels are much higher risk for a cardiac event, a stroke, and in many other these disastrous situations. So once science or technology has figured out a cheap and effective way, an accurate way of measuring glutathione levels, your cardiologist, your general practitioner, and everybody else interested in your health will be measuring glutathione levels in the future. This will happen.
It makes so much sense. And since this is being recorded, I know that whenever this does happen, we'll go back to
Oh,
this
good,
video.
you could bring it out and say, that bald guy was right.
That's right. And Dr. Gutman, of course, we can go and talk about these things like high blood pressure, stroke, and so much more. I mean, it's all in your book. But if someone were interested, where could they find out more about glutathione and heart disease?
Well, Gian-Carlo, you're very nice to give me the opportunity to pitch my book, of course. And in the book, there's a whole chapter on cardiovascular disease, and honestly, you could write a whole book on it. This is accessible. You can read about cardiovascular disease, you can read about pulmonary or lung disease, you can read about kidney disease. And what I've done in the book is I've gone through literally thousands of research articles, and I tried my best to turn them into layman's language. It may be a little bit technical, but it's nice to be able to read a chapter on cardiovascular disease, not have to read 500 articles on glutathione and cardiovascular disease. And it's also a nice tool if you want to bounce it off of your doctor or health professional, because at the end of each chapter, I've listed all the references. So if they want to go ahead and look at the original research, it's all there. And you can get that book at glutathione.org. And thanks, Carlos, for allowing me to mention that.
No, of course, Dr. Gutman. This book has really changed a lot of lives, and because of this book, and again, I'm not saying this just because, but we've been able to fall in love with glutathione. Really, it's a passion that so many of us have. It's and again, people have to know about this. They do.
Yes.
So
yes, and that's what I'm asking y'all to do. Just make people aware of a simple strategy that has potentially profound positive effects on yourself, your family, and the people you're in contact with. You're doing them a favor.
Yeah, agree. And Dr. Gutman, we spoke about the $1 million question, but I'm going to change this. I'm going to say the $1 billion question.
Okay.
People, when they hear about glutathione, and I learned this from you, the first thing they go online, they search on glutathione, they go to the health food store, and they start consuming a glutathione supplement. And I think, Dr. Glenn, I don't know you that well, but if there's a pet peeve you have, is
Absolutely.
People consuming glutathione pills by itself. So people are thinking, okay, what's the best way naturally to raise glutathione inside my body?
You're right. It's a pet peeve. I'd go further than that. It makes me crazy. Because very clearly, eating glutathione doesn't work. It's kind of like if your son or daughter isn't doing well in high school, well, let's feed them brains. It doesn't work that way. You need to feed them what's good for their brain. In the case of glutathione, your cell makes its own glutathione. So what you need to do is give your cell the specific nutrients so it can make the glutathione. Eating glutathione is just not effective, nor is it natural, because the glutathione that you find in pills and tablets are 100% genetically modified organisms. You take either certain bacteria or certain fungus, in this case yeast, and modify them genetically so they produce glutathione. And then you feed that glutathione or inject it into people's veins. No, you should be using your body's own glutathione. And to do that, you need to give it the precursors or building blocks. And in medicine, there's a drug that's a very effective precursor called N-acetylcysteine. I use N-acetylcysteine if I have a patient who's dying in front of me in the emergency department from a specific overdose. I'll inject N-acetylcysteine into them to raise their glutathione and save their life. Except this drug, which you can actually find non-prescription, has very real side effects and a very short half-life. So when you eat N-acetylcysteine, most people don't feel very well. And because it has a short half-life, you have to take it 4 or 5 times during the day. So the 4th or 5th time that you take it, you're going to be 4 or 5 times feeling worse than the first time. And it has limited use because after a while, it's counterproductive. It works against you. So clearly, the route that I've taken is what I learned from Dr. Bunos more than a quarter century ago, and that is to use an undenatured whey protein isolate prepared in a specific way as to preserve these natural proteins in their complete natural state. Because if you alter these proteins at all, they don't work. Of course, they patented this process, and we've now have over 80 published articles on this substance called Immunical, which is comes originally from a select family of proteins found in milk, and that's the way, the safe and effective way to raise glutathione, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the major textbook that sits on the desk of every single doctor and every single pharmacist in Canada, United States. In the United States, you have that book called the PDR, Physician's Desk Reference. In Canada, we have the CPS, the Compendium of Pharmaceutical Specialties. And if you look up how do you raise glutathione, you find one drug called NAC, and you find a natural product called Immunical.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, actually, no, I don't think I know if there's info that people have to know about is how to raise glutathione. How to raise glutathione. And for the past 2 years, since the pandemic, it's been researched so much because of what glutathione does. And most people don't know. And Dr. Gutman, any exciting news before we finish that you can share to everybody on glutathione, maybe?
Yeah, I mentioned it, I think, in the when people were coming online before we had this program, just the remarkable progress that's been made on glutathione and our current major health issue, that being coronavirus. And it's very clear now that COVID-19 patients are going to be glutathione deficient, and now it's becoming clear that raising glutathione is going to improve the state of these individuals. What hasn't been shown yet, but I'm sure it's coming, but it does take some time, is that raising glutathione as a prophylaxis against getting sick would be a good idea. But of course, that's much more difficult to study, given that we have our hands full right now with people who are sick, and they're going to get the first attention. But I welcome you to look up these studies. Go to PubMed.gov, PubMed.gov, and enter 2 keywords: glutathione, COVID-19, and you don't have enough paper in your printer to handle that material.
Wonderful. And like you said,
and about time. Yeah.
No, and Dr. Gutman, again, thank you so much. And I remember once in an article that you wrote on, you said that in the supplement world, and just when it comes to natural substance, right, like vitamin C, vitamin E, glutathione, what matters is research research, and
Yeah.
research. And because of the internet, it's just so easy. PubMed, Glutathione, and if, and for, whoever's watching this live or video, even though we encourage to, to research, sometimes just to read an article on glutathione, for example, COVID-19, is difficult because of the medical language. And that's why we bring Dr. Gutman, because Dr. Gutman, since he's such an expert on this topic, he just breaks it down into illustrations. And then we can understand what he's talking about, right? So research, absolutely, but go to amaglutathione.org, get his book, keep connecting, to whenever we have interviews with Dr. Gutman, because you will understand truly what glutathione does, and you'll understand it in a way that you'll be able not only to understand it, but to communicate it. Okay. And so, Dr. Gutman, my friend, thank you so much once again for this amazing interview. I learn all the time with you. And I know that all the people that are connected live and are watching through video have gotten so much value. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Gian-Carlo. It's such a pleasure working with you. And you're an inspiration to a lot of people. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dr. Gutman. And for everybody that is connected watching, please go back to the person that invited you and tell them, I wanna get on that natural product that Dr. Gutman spoke about, that product that's clinically and scientifically proven to raise glutathione inside your body. And I'm sure that you will have fantastic results. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And my name is Gian-Carlo Torres, and I am your friend.